Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Total War Warhammer 2. So I just had an interesting game and wanted to sort of share it. It's one of the ones where I wanted to talk about like the greenskins matchup, because it's actually one I think that favors the greenskins, but I want to show you how not to take it and sort of give you an example as to why exactly the greenskins are so good in this matchup. So my opponent here ended up taking Wurrzag, which I think is fine. I was taking the Everqueen, and I find that the Everqueen is actually really good at assassinating pretty much any of these guys, because she's got, of course, access to a pretty decent spell in terms of doing that in the Arcane Unforging. It's a very, very decent spell in terms of dealing with those guys. Honestly, 16 is a bit too much considering how much damage it does, but it does a decent amount of damage all in all. Wurrzag also a little bit physical resistant, quite a bit physical resistant in fact, so being able to assassinate him magically is one of the ways that you do it. But yeah, what makes the greenskins so good in this matchup? Well, for one thing, the Goblin big bosses are kind of crazy in terms of like how good they are for their cost. 380 is kind of stupid, so that part is really an amazing thing for them to be able to do. I should not have clicked on that. And they've got lots of these infantry here, like these orc boys here, and more often nasty skulkers. These units are really quite cheap. 500 is a very cheap unit. And these units perform pretty darn well for their cost. A unit of Nasty Skulkers, I would say, is better than a unit of Spearmen under most circumstances, because they've got that sort of opportunist murder, which makes it so that if they're winning, they start winning harder. And of course, they've also got the Smoke Bomb ability, which is kind of interesting. Like, I don't necessarily think this is the best of abilities, but it can be useful if you're being chased by cavalry or something like that. Stops people from using any sort of cycle charging sort of stuff. Very decent ability there, but yeah, they've got all sorts of things. Goblins are also extremely cost effective. I actually think goblins, especially with a lot of veterancy, are really powerful. Some people disagree about that, but basically they've got all these different options for powerful units that are very inexpensive, that are effective. The orc big ones are pretty expensive there, but you're looking at 800 points there, and you're looking at a unit that therefore costs the same as the White Lions of Grace. You can directly sort of compare them. This unit is just so much more durable. Even though the White Lions have 40 more armor, these guys have 2,625 more hit points than the White Lions do. Their leadership is a little bit worse, their speed's a little bit worse, but everything else is better. Their melee attack's better, their melee defense is better, their weapon strength is better. They've got a bonus versus a large with the which the White Lions don't, of course. And like, these guys aren't armor piercing, yeah, but their armor piercing damage is 13. That's actually really high anyway. The charge bonus is 27, which is really good. So these guys are just a very powerful sort of unit. And this sort of goes down across the line for the entire orc roster there. You can even take some sort of unit like the Savage Orcs there. These guys are also really tough, really durable with 25 damage resistance. The Frenzy, they've got a lot of weapon strength there, charge bonus. They're just a really great swarming unit. And this is where you sort of win against the High Elves, is because you can sort of flood the entire map with just cheap orcs, and they will basically make it really difficult for the High Elves to sort of successfully fight back, just because they're sort of flooding over the fields and making it really hard for you to do anything. And then you can sort of top that off with some sort of like Night Goblin Squig Hoppers or other units like that to sort of deal the damage and kill the High Elves wherever you can. You can take lots of this really cheap Goblin Wolf Rider cavalry, and you can take some of the stealth Rusty Arrows here. You can take some of the Night Goblin Archers with Fanatics or something like that potentially. And yeah, all these units are just hard for the High Elves to deal with in sufficient numbers. It's not that any of these individual units are actually that scary. It's just that when the Orc player has got the ability to take, like, this is most of a roster, and I have not even spent all that much money there, so you can get a huge army with the Orcs. Now, what doesn't work very well is when you take a lot of artillery and you focus on taking these larger monsters here. The reason is that while High Elves are generally speaking fairly weak against artillery, I don't think that the Orcs are necessarily the best faction for sort of defending it. I think that they're one of those armies that if you're sort of standing there guarding your artillery, you're not necessarily going to get enough done with these things to successfully win the game just based off of that, like you can with, say, the Empire or with the Skaven. And because of that, you kind of have to have these units just as a minor support element to a larger offensive. And you certainly never take giants against High Elves. The reason, of course, is that the High Elves have so much missile fire that you're going to have a difficult time using giants effectively against them. Like, even the Ragnarok spiders, even with their ability to summon more spiders there, I don't find that these guys are necessarily that effective against the High Elves, just because, you know, like, you're going to have plenty of units anyway. I actually find that Maternal Instinct hard to pop, just because you're fighting against the High Elves and you've got your full army anyway. It could be a good unit otherwise, though. So, yeah, like, numbers is your advantage when you're playing as the orcs, not what my opponent ends up taking. So let's go ahead and take a look at this match here. Now, the thing about the artillery is that you could use it anyway, just because it's inexpensive. You can sort of take it as a sort of garnish to the side there. But you can see my opponent's army here. He's got a decent number of fairly cheap units, but then he's maxed out the number of, like, he's got 2 giants, he's got 2 Doomdires, he's got the Goblin Rock Climber. This is all very expensive stuff here. He's only got 1 unit of Black Orcs. Like, this is too much money spent on these sorts of things. And yes, the giants do make a very effective counter against the swordmasters, but they cost way more than the swordmasters. And he doesn't really have any other units that can sort of take advantage of that gap there. Yes, the Orc Boys I do think are actually a really great matchup against things like the Spearmen. I think that the Goblins are also even good things matched against that. They aren't actually very good at defending the Rock Lobber or the Goblin Doomdivers. The reason that they're not very good at this is because these units do not really... they don't have a bonus versus large, and their unit mass is incredibly low. So the Goblin unit is actually a pretty bad defender unit. You would want to use something with actual spear bonuses. The Black Orcs, I actually am going to hit them with the Dragon Breath and find out that that basically does absolutely nothing against Black Orcs with the type of dragon I'm using. I have to have at least the Moon Dragon, I think, before I can actually deal with Black Orcs with Dragon Breath. In any event, I'm just trying to get some skirmishing down here. I've actually hit Wurrzag with Arcane and Forging. Like I said, this is actually kind of one of the reasons you don't want to be doing this. You don't want to be standing and hanging back and using all this artillery as the Orcs. It's because you can potentially lose your general to this kind of sniping, and there's no healing for them. And he's lost quite a lot of hit points there. If we look at Wurrzag, he's down to 2,586 hit points there, 2,454. So he's lost about a third of his hit points just from, you know, a single Arcane on Forging. That's quite a lot of hit points for him. I managed to get the Dragon Breath here, and you actually see, like, he dodges a lot of it, but what did hit did not do any damage. So this was, I'm just like, you know what, okay, I'm not going to try that again, because even if I got a solid one, like, you can see that it hit a bunch of these guys. It didn't deal any damage to them. Dragon Pin in place by Effigy of Degit, basically going to let him fling Goblin Doomdivers at this guy. It's not actually the most damaging of missiles, so I don't care too much. But we're going to actually be like, okay, you know what, he's got so much artillery fire that there's no way he's going to be compelled to move forward, even if I assassinate his general. Because even if I kill him, he's really got no impetus to move forward and engage my army. One of the things I can do, though, is shut down Wa, thanks to the fact that I've kind of got the ability to sort of shut down his ability to cast spells for a short period of time. So if he charges and I cast that ability on him and he won't have that Wa bonus, he's going to be down a lot of the hitting power for the Orc army against the High Elves, because that's sort of how they rush through and over them really, really effectively. So that was one of the reasons why I took that ability. It's just like, okay, I know that these guys are charging in, they're about to hit me. I want to get rid of that ability for him to use that that powerful Orc bonus there, and potentially maybe kill him before I could even consider using it. Now, at this point in time, my army is going to start moving forward here. I'm sort of like, okay, maybe I can compel him to move forward here. Let's try and bring Alariel Radiant in here, still using Arcane Conduit. I recharge my magic a lot faster than Wurrzag does, so it's easier for me to use these expensive spells as opposed to what he can do. But he can still get the Wind's magic back relatively quickly, so... yeah, in any event, though, one of the other nice things about Alariel is that she does provide that magic damage. So if you're up against the Orcs and they decide to go heavy on the Savage Orcs, or they've got Wurrzag, you can actually use that to reduce the amount of damage resistance that their army's going to have. Now, Orc Boys are actually fairly missile resistant, thanks to the fact that they have gotten, got shields there. Casting another one of those Arcane Forgings on Wurrzag over here, and he's just like, this is brutal. He's down below 2,000 hit points pretty quickly after that, and he's not really happy. I'm going to try and get a charge against him with Alariel, since he's kind of actually away from some of his other units there. Yeah, he's going to sort of dodge that, so I'm going to have to get up into the air again. I don't want to be stuck on the ground there while those giants are lumbering around. Coincidentally, neither my opponent nor myself have taken really any cavalry in this one. Night Goblins get hit by a Dragon Breath, and that's what you use the like, Fire Dragon for. Wipe out a unit of Goblins or something like that. But anyway, yeah, he starts lumbering forward, I start moving my army forward. I've got lots of archers in this force. He's firing my swordmasters down, which is a good target. But in any event, we start firing at him, and I think that I actually have the advantage in terms of missile fire. We are going to get some random shots off against Orc Boys, which I don't really care to repeat much of, but we're suddenly folks firing on those Black Orcs. And these guys have got lots of hit points, they've got lots of armor, but this is a lot of missiles for them to be taking. And I actually am more worried about them, ultimately, than I am about the Giants. My Dragon's just getting into the Goblin Rock Lobber to sort of tie it up there and make it sort of distracted. And we're having Lariel go on a wild merry chase against Wurrzag. I don't think I actually end up getting, yeah, I get Effigy of Digitted there, but I'm actually going to be able to chase after him, I think, and stop him from casting, or using his abilities. I think he does actually have Wa, so I'm not sure why he doesn't end up using it here. In any event, though, the Black Orcs there basically chopped down to half. I am, like I said, I was worried more about them than I was about the Giants. The Giants are pretty scary, but they don't have necessarily the best ability to deal damage. Units over here, Orc Boys, like, they're fighting against Swordmasters, and the Swordmasters were practically killed off at the start there, but they're still able to finish off that unit of Orc Boys, basically. Break against the Giant there. The Giant is now taking, like, full focus fire from my Lotham Seaguard. The Archers are firing at the Black Orcs there, but I probably should have switched over. Arcane Unfortunate. Actually, no, I did Arcane Unfortunate him again, probably at the point where he was going to do it, since he didn't quite hit my lines yet with those Black Orcs, really. So yeah, this is, I think, is exactly the wrong way to try and fight the High Elves when you're playing as the Orcs. You can see that this Giant here is just pin-cushioned immediately. Yes, he took out a unit of Swordmasters that had been already hit by a lot of artillery, but at the same time, it's probably not worth the cost, because these guys are expensive, like 1,600 points. It's more than a unit of Swordmasters. So that's a lot of points to lose against all these cheap archers. We turn these other archers to face this other Giant here. He starts taking some shots here really quickly. Like, this guy goes down so fast against arrows. This Giant over here, you can see how fast these guys are going down. The Arachnarok Spider Queens are a lot more expensive, but they still take damage pretty fast against this kind of arrow fire, this volume of arrow fire. But they do resist it a bit better than the Giant just because of all that armor. They also have smaller hit point pools though, so you never really know there. This guy's just being turned into a pincushion. He walks into the back of my spearman, which is a bit unpleasant, but then he breaks. And part of this is because you can see that his general's gone. Wurrzag sort of got chased off by Alariel, and this is going to be the end of his entire army right off the bat there. So this is how you do not play, in my opinion, the Orcs. Wurrzag especially getting that separated out from the rest of his army. This army being not necessarily a humongous force there. The fact that he had 3 whole units in reserve holding back and defending these catapults and stuff like that, that were still good. They got plenty of kills. But did they get enough to really justify their cost? I'm not really sure they did. I think that you don't really take these sort of units against High Elves as the Orcs. I think that they're good, decent artillery pieces, but it doesn't really mesh well with the rest of the army composition there. Giants, definitely a no-no against High Elves, and a lot of other factions as well, but one of the things that I think caught my opponent off guard is the kind of wonkiness of my build here. This is a very non-elite build against the Orcs there, and I think that this is how you'd play as the High Elves against Orcs, because when you go for a very elite build, it's so easy to get overwhelmed that this kind of composition would destroy you, no questions asked. If I had lots of Swordmasters, if I had lots of Dragon Princes, this would be something that gave me a very hard time. So the sort of army that I came in here with, it really was sort of with that in mind, the fact that High Elves don't necessarily have the right tools to deal with large mass numbers that are supported by these powerful units. Well, if I sort of don't care about these powerful units because I myself have gone fairly broad, sometimes you can win based on that, just based on the fact that your general's broken compared to his. So anyway, that's our video for today. Hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.